Hello, BookTube. I have a tag for you on this Thursday, and it's based around a fact that many of you will know about me, which is that I am very nosy. I want to know everything there is to know about all of you. And I noticed recently that one of my old nosy questions tag has had a bit of life pumped back into it after months and months, and that prompted me to make another nosy question tag. This one I'm going to limit to 20 questions. That is, after all, the stereotypical road trip game is 20 questions, not 28 questions. And I have them on the trusty iPad here. And in case any of you are wondering, you tech watchers, this is, in fact, the trusty iPad. The iPad that I called that for years on this channel that I thought gave up the ghost. This is an iPad 2. It's very old, very heavy. And I thought that it had died on me. And I thought, after a while, after getting over the sentimental parts, I thought, well, it's probably for the best because it was old. There are a bunch of things that it isn't supporting anymore, that it doesn't seem to be able to do anymore. So it's probably for the best. So I got my iPad Air, I got my RadPad, I got my iPad, my Mini, and I got a bunch of Android tablets that work just as well as an iPad for a fraction of the price. But then the other day, I was moving books around inside the depths of Mordor, and I encountered my trusty iPad. Because, of course, you don't throw away a thing like this. And I thought, all right, are you absolutely sure that it's not usable anymore? Because in very modest ways, nothing like the tech heads out there among you, my tech confidence, my tech awareness grows steadily. I am constantly educating myself on the technology that I use every day. Again, not with any kind of deep complexity, but I know for a fact that my competence, my just general competence and confidence with that kind of daily user tech is enormously greater now than it was even 5 years ago. You can teach an old dog new tricks. So I thought, well, why not power it up to 100%, turn it on, and see, just with fresh eyes, what it can and cannot do. And I am amazed. I am amazed. I don't know what I was worried about. This can do a lot. And it's only minor workarounds that are the problem. There's a very easy workaround for apps, for instance, for an older device. A lot of times, some coding or complexity or even marketing detail will have been worked in the meantime between when you got your device and now, so that when you go to it and you try to download an app that you use every day, Google Docs or Gmail or whatever, it will tell you this is no longer compatible with this machine and no update will make it compatible. And you look at that and you think, well, that's the ball game, isn't it? But that's not the ball game at all. If you go to the App Store and you go down to the bottom, you will see a list of alternatives. You'll see the little magnifying glass that's where you go if you want to search for a particular app. And in that list of alternatives, one of them is purchased, where you can survey a list of the apps that you have already purchased on that device, or on any device, on your account, on your Microsoft account. And if you go to that list of apps, you will see next to each one of them an arrow offering you to download it again. And that will work. That will work just fine. So you don't have to settle for not having that app on your iPad. You'll just get a slightly older version, but one that is still updated, still supported, and that still allows you to do what you want. In other words, there's a lot of life left, I think, in the trusty iPad, which means I have yet another iPad. And of course, since all of you have been very generous by sending me EPUBs, one of the things I'm looking at in my iPads now is storage. Because one of the things you can't do with an iPad that you can do with an Android device is increase its storage. The storage it has is the storage you're stuck with unless you use the cloud, unless you use the Google Cloud. And it turns out this iPad 2, I don't know what, I used it for 10 years. I don't know what I was doing on it, but it has a vast amount of storage left. Vast. So the next step is to get a case for this. Armored case or a leather case or something like that. Something that's nice and durable. And then I'll have just another working iPad. Fine by me. Absolutely fine by me. But I have my new original tag here on the trusty iPad. And I want everyone to do this tag. I don't think I'm going to tag anyone at the end. I think I just want everyone to do this. And this is the 20 random questions tag. Question number 1. What is the nearest place to you that's so famous everybody knows it? And for me, much as hometown pride would like me to say, any of the monuments of Boston, Old Ironsides, Boston Common, the Massachusetts State House, Old North Church, anything like that, as much as I'm tempted to say that, I know that that's not true for everybody. I'm talking about something where everyone will know it. And for me, you have to go a couple of miles further away, across the river into Cambridge, and that is Harvard University. Harvard University is a 20-minute subway ride away from me, and it is much more universally famous than any of the landmarks of Boston. Everyone has heard of Harvard University. They might think it's in Boston, and they might not just on sight recognize any of its famous quadrangles or its old buildings or the famous statue of John Harvard, but they will know the name. So that's the kind of universal recognition that I'm looking for here. So where do you have to go? From where you are, how far do you have to go to get to something like that? Question number 2, have you ever had a paper cut so bad you thought you'd die of it? And I'm talking to bookworms, so I imagine that quite a few of you have had paper cuts, maybe even bad ones. I had one in the 1970s that I honestly thought was going to need stitches. That's how much of a crybaby I was about it. And I've often wondered why paper cuts seem so much worse than most other kinds of trivial things, stubbing your toe, getting a rock in your shoe, that sort of thing. Part of it is because it's so discreet. It's just, literally the width of a piece of paper, and that feels worse. But I think also an element of it is a sense of betrayal, because books are our friends. And here they are drawing blood, sometimes a large amount of blood. So tell me your paper cut nightmare story. Question number 3, have you ever found anything genuinely valuable in a used book that you bought? And here I don't mean money, which would be the easiest answer. And I have found money in used books many, many times. And I have put money in used books many, many times. I have no idea how much money is being used in the books in this room alone as bookmarks. In America, the currency is the perfect size of a bookmark. And that often overcomes my my common sense. So, but I'm not talking about money here. I'm talking about something else. And for me, it was a long time ago. Also, I think in the 1970s, I was book hunting at a charity shop, probably a Goodwill or a Salvation Army or something like that. And they had just had a large dump off of books. The shelves were crammed with books. And a lot of them were old. A lot of them were older books with no dust jackets. And I thought, well, I'm not really interested in such things, but there might be old volumes on Boston or something like that. So I was sort of looking through those books. And one of them was about English antiquities. Largely, that gasping sound you hear is Frida Bean. She's going nuts on the bed. What are you doing, baby? What? One of them was English antiquities, and it looked like it was stoneworks, hedges, churches, that sort of thing. But I thought there might be something in it on country houses, and I have a sweet tooth for English country houses. Sorry. What are you doing? What? Oh, God. I don't know. So I picked that book up out of the pile, and I was sort of leafing through it. And when I realized that it was really old, it was a very old book. It looked of a piece with all the others, but it was significantly older than any of the others. I don't remember the exact name of the book, but I found a bunch of stuff in it. There were all sorts of paper tabs and whatnot, paper bookmarks and whatnot, and in the back there was a folded piece of paper that was old. It was as obvious as old as the book. And when I examined it there was no one in this Goodwill. There was certainly no one in the book section. What are you doing? I'm trying to tell a tedious anecdote. I don't know what kind of Wagner opera is going on over here. Oh, God. I shouldn't apologize because you care about that more than you do any tedious story of mine. But the paper in the back was a 6-page letter written by Washington Irving late in his life, one of my favorite American authors. And at first I thought it's got to be somebody else called Washington Irving. It can't be the Washington Irving. But I brought it to the Massachusetts Historical Society, and we spent a good long time. A friend of mine and I spent a good long time with that letter, and it turned out to be real. God knows if it has any value. Washington Irving is largely forgotten as an author, but I wasn't going to keep it and sell it anyway. But that's the sort of thing I'm talking about. Something where you would donate it, or you would resell it for a large amount of money, or something like that, for something valuable in a book. For me, it was a letter by Washington Irving that I got to hold in my hand. He either wrote it and sent it to somebody and they stuck it in their book, or far less likely, I think, was that the book was his and that he stuck it in his own book. But one way or another, it was a thrill. Absolute thrill. Excuse me. Let's see here. Question number 4. Have you ever read, met, or married Jacques Barzun, the snooty 20th century literary critic and literary theorist? And I have read him. I've read everything by Jacques Barzun, and I have also met him a couple of times. Wasn't the particularly talkative type, but I've never married him. No. You? Question number 5. Aside from your pets, what is the specific non-human animal you see most often? And for me, it's the common English house sparrow, which is neither English nor a sparrow. I have just those bratty little brown birds that are everywhere in America, just everywhere in Europe too. They're all over the world, and they are fascinating. I hate to say it, I hate to give it to them because they're the hoi polloi of the bird world. But I have a community of such sparrows, multi-generational community of such sparrows, that live inside the aluminum siding of Hyde Cottage. Out in the front of the house, they have long since figured out, pried open a hole in that siding. They can fit inside it. Nothing else can. Not even a starling can fit inside there. The only thing that could attack them in that space would be a snake, and there aren't any predatory snakes here. And I don't know how one would get up the house anyway. This is a place where only a bird can go, and it's perfect for them. They have gradually expanded it to go into quite a ways into the siding. And it protects them from the elements. It protects them from the worst cold of winter because it's inside insulated siding. And as a result, they are right there at the front of the house. They live and patrol and socialize in the hedges and in the lilac tree and on the grounds. And I feed them regularly and I water them regularly. I have a stone bird bath that I installed directly underneath the shade of the lilac tree so that it is perfectly sheltered. It's not even visible from the road or anywhere else. You have to walk around the corner and look directly at it to see it. I thought that would be a big hit with them. Because prior to that, they had been doing their bathing and socializing. Birds love to socialize while they bathe, just like humans do. And they'd been doing their bathing and socializing in a little divot of the concrete of the driveway that had been knocked out decades ago and just left unfixed. This divot happens to be just an oval, self-contained. It's not a crack. It's a dip in the concrete, so it holds water. After every rain, it's full of water. And I noticed that the birds love to use that spot. And I thought, well, they're just making, a virtue out of necessity. If I give them a bird bath, they won't use that anymore because it's on the ground, right next to foot traffic. But it turns out they like that anyway. They use both of them. But I feed them, and they know me now so that I can watch them while they eat. I can watch what they do and how they behave. Sometimes if I'm out and about, sometimes if I go out to, the grounds, to the dirt or the driveway or the porch or whatever, or the hedges, I don't even need to have food. They'll still come out just to look at me, just because I'm familiar to them. And so as a result, I've got to study them quite well. They are easily the answer to this question. Nothing else comes close. But what about you? Is it birds of some kind? If it's birds as an answer, don't count. That's why I put specific in there. You have to say which kind of bird it is. Question number 6. Have you ever been inside a cathedral? And if more than one, do you have a favorite? I have been inside many, many, many cathedrals. I think they're awe-inspiring. So I make a point of going out of my way to go inside them. And I do have a favorite. It's a little bit sentimental. It's St. Francis Xavier. There's the Church of St. Francis Xavier. It's a basilica in Dyersville, Iowa. I believe it's the only cathedral west of the Appalachians. I'm pretty sure that it's the only cathedral in the American Midwest. Beautiful church. Absolutely lovely. Dyersville, It is famous for that, for its church, for its amazing basilica. It's also was once upon a time famous because it was the farm toy capital of the world. If you had a little plastic farm toy or a wooden farm toy that had like a dump truck where the shovel moved, or a plow where you could where the parts moved, or you could install a farmer and you could take him out. If you had something like that anywhere in America, it was almost certainly manufactured in Dyersville once upon a time. But as the fickle fates would have it, I think Dyersville's #1 claim to fame, and you have to know about it, it's a piece of trivia, is Field of Dreams, the movie Field of Dreams with Kevin Costner and James Earl Jones and Burt Lancaster. Because at the end of that movie, the incredible saccharine end of that movie, Kevin Costner's character is having a game of catch with the ghost of his father. Baseball. It's a baseball movie. And earlier in the movie, James Earl Jones has sonorously declared that this baseball field that this character, Ray Kinsella, has built in his cornfield will attract people. It will attract tourists. They will come and they will hand over money because it is money they have, but peace they lack. And at the very end of the movie, as twilight is falling on this gorgeous Iowa landscape, the camera pulls out from Kevin Costner playing catch to a line of cars that is slowly making its way along the perpendicular roads of Iowa to this baseball field. It's sunset, so the cars all have their headlights on, and the headlights are how you can tell where the cars are and how many there are. And it's a long, long line of cars that are headed there, and that took place in Dyersville. That Field of Dreams caravan of cars took place in Dyersville, and there are people in Dyersville today who have a proud memory of volunteering to take part in that iconic final scene. So that's what Dyersville is known for. But they do have basilica, if you're interested. And question number 7: have you ever been actually seeing and hearing things delirious? So not catching something out of the corner of your eye and it being mistaken, or being out in the sun too long and you're a little bit lightheaded or anything like that. But I mean actually delirious. Those of you who've experienced it will know what I'm talking about. It's very distinct, where you see and hear things that you are 100% sure are real, and they are not. They are not. Sometimes they are manifestly unreal, a goat walking across the ceiling, and yet you still believe that you are actually seeing them, and that somehow the world needs to be reordered because these things are existing. And my answer is yes. I have been bitten and stung by many poisonous snakes and by scorpions, and that'll do it. A lot of times that'll do it, and that happened to me a few times. And it's distinctly weird. It's distinctly weird because you're sure that what you're seeing is real. So I'd love to hear your own experiences. There are more experiences now of an anecdotal kind about this in 2020 than there were in 2019, because a lot of people who suffer from COVID-19 experience delusions and then report on it. For a lot of people, it's the first and only time they've ever had it. They've ever experienced that. So those are making for some very interesting stories. So I'd love to hear yours. Question number 8. Do you have blood relatives who read for pleasure? Not friends, but actual family members who read for pleasure. A lot of stories that I've heard of people on BookTube, the answer would be no, they don't. I don't know if I do or not. My connection with knowing that kind of thing about my own blood relatives ended when me sainted Ma died. Me sainted Ma was not a reader. She was, as she put it so often, saving my eyes. And late in her life, I used to say to her, well, Ma, what are you saving them for? The organ donation bank? And she would say, that's your mother you're talking to, What are you, wise? She carried a book with her at all times. The day Lincoln was shot. But only because it had the perfect heft and accessibility as a bee book. She wanted something to swat at bees if they molested her. So she carried a book in her pocketbook at all times, but she never read it. But I'm curious about you. Do you have readers in your family? Question number 9. How many species of animal have you smooched smack dab on the lips? And for me, the count is 4. I have smooched humans, smack dab on the lips. Dogs, of course, because we're not talking here about technical, anatomical lips. I'm talking about the area right around the pie hole. I've smooched dogs many, many, many times. Also, pigs. It's a bit of an immersive experience. Those of you who have ever smooched with a pug, for instance, that's the closest that the dog world comes to smooching with a pig. It's a different kind of experience, but delightful, very delightful. And with pigs, unlike with a lot of dogs, it takes a little bit of preparing. No pig is really willing to do that right away. They're a little bit leery of strangers. Even the little ones are. But if you get to know an adult pig, they'll smooch with you. I recommend it. And also last for me would be dolphins, who again don't have anatomical lips, but they do have, a precise opening at the front of their beak where you can smooch them, and they know perfectly well what you're doing when you do that. And it turns out that they're perfectly amenable to that. I've done this once upon a time. The New England Aquarium here in Boston had a live dolphin show every day. And the dolphins were kept in an adjoining area. That was phased out, rightly so, because it wasn't good conditions for the dolphins to live in. But if you knew somebody who volunteered at the aquarium, you could get in and see them. And I experienced it there, and also behind the scenes. I had a behind-the-scenes tour at the SeaWorld in Orlando, Florida, and smooched with a dolphin there too. And in both cases, in both times, everybody that I was with wondered, what on earth are you doing? That is so gross. I didn't think it was gross. Dolphins are incredible. And the dolphins didn't seem to mind. So my total is 4. What's your total? A lot of you are going to say cats. I have a terror that a lot of you are going to say cats. But I think some of you have hamsters or guinea pigs or rats or even a snake. I want to hear it. What's your total? But be sure to include humans. Question number 10. Do you ever listen to the radio? And do you have any favorite programs or people? I don't listen to the radio anymore. There are internet radio stations and internet versions of ordinary, FM radio stations that I would listen to, that I really like, but they're bombarded. They're just saturated with ads, with commercials, so that in any given hour you have heard 10 times more commercials than you've heard any content. And that, for me, just ruins the experience. Because at the end of that hour, I can tell you from memory the commercials, and I don't want to know those commercials at all. But once upon a time, before the internet, I lived on the radio. Absolutely. I listened to tons and tons of things all the time. The Texaco Opera broadcast, which I believe is still going on. I don't know if Texaco still underwrites it, but whenever I wasn't at the Metropolitan Opera in New York, I listened to it on the Texaco Opera broadcast. But also late night, Art Bell was a radio host who used to host a weird fringe stuff show, and he had call-in guests. He was a wonderful, wonderful radio host, wonderfully congenial person, wonderful voice for radio as well. It was sort of a gullibility dipstick. It was out there subjects, UFOs, hidden world organizations, Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, that sort of thing. So think of it as similar in that regard to that element of the Joe Rogan podcast, only unlike Joe Rogan, Art Bell was not an idiot. And so he didn't believe everything, from 1 minute to the... He wasn't a stoner, in other words. So with Joe Rogan, it's, I heard walls talk to each other. Think there's anything to that? What do you think there is to that? Well, sir, I'm a government economist. You called me on here to talk about the Fed. Yeah, but do you think walls talk to each other? But Art Bell, instead, he wanted to present the story to you, and did a wonderful job of it. And also, there was a German radio host called Karl Haas, who did a show called Adventures in Good Music, where he would introduce certain pieces of classical music, talk about them, their significance, play them for you, and introduced himself in every episode with "Hello, everyone." Hello, everyone. I missed both those, but I enjoyed them both. Question number 11: have you ever been to the Eiffel Tower, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, or the Louvre? Have you ever been to any one of those three? I have been to all three of those, and I have been, much against my own best instincts, I have been convinced to go up into the Eiffel Tower to the top, and up into the Tower of Pisa. The latter, I had no idea why anybody would do it. It was terrifying. But the Louvre, yes, many times in many seasons. Excuse me. Question number 12. What trivial little thing do you miss the most that you've lost due to the pandemic? So, not the big things here, obviously, like a job or a loved one, God help us, and not meant to trivialize that, but there are little things that we've lost as well that are gone. And for me, it would be hired car services like Uber or Lyft, which I thought were wonderful. just wonderful. You put your credit card on file with them so that you don't have to fumble for money and you don't have to think about it at all. And then you call them. You use an app to do it. It's very quick. It's very easy. It's half the price of a taxi cab, a normal taxi cab. And the drivers are always nicer. Taxi cab drivers, before the advent of these car services, didn't care whether they were nice to you or not. They were the only game in town. I've argued with so many taxi drivers in my life, so many of them, where I've said, every variation in the world, including the most common one, which is after 10 minutes of driving, look, I know what you're doing here. I know the way to get from where we started to where I want to go, and this is not it. I'm not being a backseat driver. I'm directly telling you that you are trying to pad your fare, and I'd appreciate it if you'd stop. Here's what I want you to do to get back to the right direct route. And invariably, cab drivers would give me lip when I did that, it was demonstrably true. And also all sorts of other things. I'd have cab drivers who would just rant and rave, just out of their minds. I had no choice because they were the only thing that could get me from A to B. I don't drive. But car services like Lyft and Uber were a dream come true. You didn't have to fumble with money. You didn't have to worry about tipping. You did all that later. I loved it. And that, I think they still operate now during the pandemic, but you'd be insane to use one. A closed surface with a person who's exposed to a dozen people a day? No. So I missed that. Because that gave me the freedom. I don't drive a car. And that gave me the freedom of having a car at my disposal. That was kind of nice. And then question number 3 is, what little thing do you miss the least that you've lost due to the pandemic? And for me, that would be pants. It used to be that I had to wear pants for specific meetings, events of kinds or other, and almost all of those have been canceled or turned online where you don't need pants. So I don't miss that at all. That's a little thing that is gone completely. I could broaden that out for the purposes of discussion. I don't want to do too much of that because these tags go long, but I could broaden that out for the purposes of discussion just to say that I think that may be a change that this pandemic will work on society just in general. I think society just in general has been learning in the last 6 months how little people need to actually do in order to look busy, right? I mean, if there's a once a month meeting that you have to drive across town to get to, and it's a waste of your time, and you know that ahead of time, so does everybody else. What happens if it's during a thunder and lightning downpour? You still have to go, except now everybody knows you don't. Now all corporations know that you don't have to go into the office to get all your work done. Everybody knows that now. It's not theoretical anymore. In order to stay afloat, businesses had to go to telecommuting. They had to go to work at home. They had to go to telemeetings. Now they all know that those things work. Why would anybody go back to doing that? Why would somebody who's representing their company, who wants to be in the quorum of a meeting on the East Coast, fly from LA once a month when they don't have to? Why would they do that? So, but in my very limited version of that, I am also freed from all of those things. I still do them, but I do them, via the phone, by this technology that has been there all along. This has been possible and easy all along. It's just been dumb momentum and routine that stopped it from being universally embraced. I think probably that will be a long-term effect of this, is that a lot of us will do a lot less of that. Don't know how that will reshape the urban environment, or anything, really, but we shall see. But anyway, question number 14. What's your relationship with small talk? Do you hate it like acid? Do you love it? Are you merely so-so about it? And as will surprise no one who watches this channel, I love small talk. Absolutely love it. I'm very good at it, and I love to do a lot of it. I actually miss it. I thought at the beginning, in March and April, of the beginning of this pandemic in Boston, I thought it would be gone forever. It has returned. People adapted. They wear masks. They keep their distance, and small talk can't go on forever. Those are the 3 limitations, but it can still happen. I take Frida for many walks during the day, and we each get as much small talk as we could possibly want. So it came back, thank God. Let's see here. Question number 15. Have you ever won money at gambling? I have not. No, I've never seen the appeal. Any kind of organized gambling in places like Atlantic City or Las Vegas, you only have to think about these places for 1 second to realize that the odds are astronomically against you, and that they are being carefully monitored to be so. So these beginner slot machine type gambling things have been programmed to give you a couple of early wins, and that's to hook you. But that's not real. That's I never have. And of course, needless to say, I have neither bet on horse racing or dog racing, nor have allowed anyone that I know to bet on horse racing or dog racing. And when friends of mine have said why, I've said, you are perfectly free to bet on a horse race and bet on a dog race once you can prove to me that the horses and dogs are there of their own free will. They aren't. They aren't. They're being whipped and beaten and prodded around this track for your entertainment. You're not going to bet on that when you're with me. But maybe some of you have gone to Atlantic City or the Mohegan Sun or whatever and won money. That does occasionally happen. I'd love to hear about it. And also, I'd love to hear, if you did win, did it increase your willingness to do it again? Question number 16, do you ever give money or time to charity? To charities of some kind or other. And before the pandemic, I preferred to give time to charities. I worked with children at an intensive care unit here in Boston, and I donated a large amount of time to an animal shelter here in Boston. Donating time is, of course, much harder to do now than it was before. Largely, it's frowned upon, discouraged. So I've just increased how much money that I donate to those causes. Question number 17, do you craft? Knitting, crocheting, woodworking, pottery throwing? Do you do anything like that? I don't. I don't do anything like that, but I know a lot of you do. And I'd love to hear stories about it. I'd love to hear what it means to you and how long it took you to get good at it. Question number 18 is, do you ever talk to yourself when you're alone? And by here I mean completely alone, not when pets are around, and not when you're walking around outside surrounded by other people. I mean when you're completely alone. Do you talk to yourself out loud? My answer is no, I don't. I talk to myself all the time. With Frida here, because she likes the sound of my voice, I also talk directly to her, and I will sometimes mutter under my breath when I'm out in public, but it's because of people I'm seeing out in public. It's a response to them. I don't just freewheel soliloquize when I'm out and about, but I wonder if you do. Do you talk to yourself? Question number 19 is, were you or are you now, if you're in school, a social queen bee in college, if you went to college? And I was not. I knew some people who were. It was all they did. They couldn't stand to be alone. Couldn't stand to be inactive, had to be out and doing things. And I always viewed it as a drastic weakness on their part. And occasionally the campus would be shut down by a massive snowstorm, a massive ice storm. And those people went nuts, just nuts, because they couldn't do anything. But I had a large circle of friends, and I really enjoyed their company, but I wasn't a queen bee. No, not at all. And question number 20, final question here, thank God, because this has gone long, as always. Are you a sunrise person or a sunset person? I myself am a sunset person. I try never to miss one. I once upon a time ideally suited to see them from my own windows, but a row of condominiums have gone up that blocks that view. But nevertheless, I tried to have my dogs out at sunset so that I can experience it. Not so much sunrise, but I've known people in my life who absolutely swear by the sunrise. They cannot. They've told me over the years that their day is just a mess if it doesn't start with that moment of complete tranquility, with watching the sun come up. I'm wondering if you're one of those people. So there you go. That is the 20 questions tag, the first of many to come in 2020. But I'm like I said, I'm not going to tag anybody specifically here because I want everybody to do this. I want all of you to do this. I want to know the answers to this. So all of my usuals, Britta and Mark and Jason, David Murphy, if he's still around, everybody else, I want everybody to do these, but also not my usuals. Even if I don't know you exist, I want you to do these questions because I want to know the answers. Because I'm nosy. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.